right. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Good evening and good week. Top of the week to you, though it's the end of the first day. So how was your weekend? I got plenty to report on. I'll probably just sprinkle that in throughout the next couple of days, though. Although we have a little bit of time for improv in the second half tonight, the first half is going to be very, very... I've been waiting for this one again for a while now. I found our guest, Megan Fox. She's a journalist. She's an author. She's, I think she's from Chicago, but she's in New York right now. And she has been covering for nearly 20 years everything that has to do with CPS, horror stories, child so-called protective services, medical kidnapping, which we'll be discussing tonight, and a few other things. It all really ties together. The relationship between the state, that oily relationship between the state and the people, and especially trying to weasel their way into the way that every American household lives, how a child is raised. It's really something else. And, you know, we've brought this up in the past. I did a show with this audience, it's probably less than a year ago that I brought up CPS horror stories. And probably around that time is when I found Megan, her work online. I said, oh, I got to get her on the show. Well, it took a few months for her to see me in the inbox, but once she did, we became fast friends because she had been watching the show for a few years. So, boy, that makes booking a lot easier. But we can jump over all the awkward stuff and just become friends at that point. So we got Megan on tonight, and all of her information is in the description of this episode, right there in the description. And just to let you know, we're gonna fill up the first hour very nicely, but if we have some bonus to do together, I'm going to hold her over to the second half, which is exclusively on the Foxhole link in the description of the episode. And if that is too much, quite frankly.tv, which is powered by Foxhole and has been for years now. So that's what we're doing for the second half, because not only will there be a little bit of bonus with Megan if it calls for it, but there is also some really interesting developments on the Eastern Front in Ukraine, as we are either getting ready for the big false flag to revive interest in that region and bring us to nuclear war, which seems ridiculous because I think we lose that one way or another, or all of the big liars are cashing out their chips. We're going to get into that, and we're also going to open up the lines and see what's been going on with you all. Me, I think the highlight of my weekend, aside from just being around family, Aurora, she has a little cold again. It's funny, I thought I was getting sick too until I left and I came here, and now I'm starting to feel pretty good. I think it's like an E.T. Elliott kind of a thing, where I've just been around her and on the couch with her and making sure she's all right, and I'm convinced, I feel something weird. I feel something weird going on. But right now I feel great. So it's probably just, some kind of telepathy kind of a thing, or who knows. Anywho, welcome to the show. It's quite frankly, I saw that Owen Schroyer, here's a little bit for the grab bag tonight. I saw Owen Schroyer is getting released from prison early. I think this Friday. So I feel very, very happy about that, reading that. Would love to have him on the show one day. Would love to meet him. When I heard about his sentencing, which is ridiculous, this is all free speech sentencing, wasn't even he didn't even go into the building at the Capitol, was there on the bullhorn telling people not to go in, but still, they need boogeymen, so they gave him 3 months, and I think he was originally set to be released on Christmas Eve. So it must be a good behavior or something going on there. Good for Owen. That's going to be one hell of a first show back on InfoWars. So I wonder how much he's going to go into it. We also have great couple other guests coming on this week. On Wednesday night is Ben Davidson, Space Weather News, Suspicious Observers. That's going to be... I hope you're in a good mood. I hope you can maintain your good mood, because there's a lot there that's probably going to be pretty stark as far as the forecast for the Earth for the next 25 to 30 years that Ben has been building up on his channel for a long time. I've got plenty of questions, a lot of questions. A lot of the questions I had have been brought up recently by another guy that I really appreciate his work, Jimmy Corsetti from Bright Insight. Those two spent a couple hours together about a month or so ago. So I'll have some follow-ups based on that, but I want you all to enjoy yourself on Wednesday night. I'm sure you will. Then on Thursday night, we're going interdimensional. Okay, so the first one is an intergalactic, then we're going interdimensional. On Thursday, when Ashton Forbes comes on and we start talking about this Malaysian Flight 370 mystery that has been revived. What the hell's going on there? I've got plenty of notes. I've been writing the notes down. And then on Friday, I don't know what we're doing Friday on the 8th, on Owen Schroyer's release date. Matt will be in the studio, I'm pretty sure. But earlier that day, I will be recording an episode with Mel K, going back on Mel's show. And then next week will be great, kicking it off with Stephen Jonathan. He's coming back to talk about St. Nick, the elves, Krampus, Timothy Alberino, Fleckus Friday. And I'm working on a big Christmas guest roulette show that may have to be 2 nights. So all of that is in the works. And there you go. All right. Let's go into the grab bag, shall we? First one up is from Yahoo Finance, so you know it's good. Forget the triple-demic, ladies and gentlemen. Did you hear what I just said? I said triple-demic. Okay, forget about that. The U.S. is headed for a syndemic, S-Y-N-demic this winter. And experts warn we are not prepared. We are not prepared for what the experts have in mind for us. COVID will likely reach levels in December not yet seen this year, combining with surges of flu, RSV, and other pathogens. They can't just call it colds anymore. Did you know that this winter the pathogens are going to surge? Doesn't that sound so much worse? I can't. Oh my gosh. This was written by one Aaron Prater. Oh, Aaron. How do I say this? Combining with surges of RSV, blah, 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 from last year's triple-demic. Did you know that we had a triple-demic last year? I didn't know that. Raj Rajnaharian, Assistant Dean of Research and Associate Professor at the New York Institute of Technology campus in Jonesboro, Arkansas, told Fortune that the U.S. is a sitting duck in the face of a syndemic winter. It's a term he prefers to triple-demic, so he says triple-demic is not. It's just like when they say that global warming and climate change isn't doing it and cutting it anymore, and we've moved past that. Now it's global boiling, and we just all have to just sit here getting boiled, and there's no, but there's still a chance we can turn it all around. We're boiling to death now, but there's still a chance. It's a term he prefers to triple-demic, as it acknowledges the impact of more than 3 pathogens on the healthcare system and the need for policies to address the phenomenon, in addition to medical interventions. You hear that? It's a new phenomenon. Strained hospital capacities, workforce exhaustion, burnout, a lack of effective therapeutic tools, poor communication, a lack of compliance with COVID precautions. Nobody wants to wear your mask? Fine. You don't want to stand 3 yards away from the next person online at CVS while you buy cat litter? Fine. You'll reap the whirlwind though. Oh, you're going to go to a diner? You're going to go to a diner and not wear your mask when you stand up, but take it off when you sit down? Hey, well, you're the idiot not following the science. So this is what I don't know what it is, but these freaks, these overeducated, overpaid freaks, always give them something to do. They have to feel important. It's not a triple-demic anymore. That sounds too juvenile. Triple-demic? It's a syndemic. It's a synthesis of demics. The demics are synthesizing before our very eyes. You see? It's very important. All right. Oh, and Hillary Clinton Kill Bitch is out there doing her thing. Hill Bitch. Hillary says extreme heat has killed 500,000 people, which is almost as much as she and her husband have killed over the years. There she is. She told COP28 conference that extreme heat has killed 500 million people. Oh wait, 500,000 or 500 million? The headline says 500,000, and this is 500 million. Most of them women and girls. Oh, much worse. Failed to cite any actual science. Well, that is the science, the feeling of dread and fear. There you go. So thank God that Hillary is out there bringing the world more doom and gloom. It's exactly what we needed. And we're going to bring this up on Wednesday night. This is from Study Finds. Earth's magnetic field could completely flip soon, as physicist explains what that means. Well, we are going to be able to do that with Ben Davidson a little bit on Wednesday night. Perhaps that is what we'll open up with. You know, it's when Ben comes on, I can say, hey, what the hell is this all about? Earth's magnetic field. Now they're saying over here that the flip that is coming is just that the energy, the magnetic poles are going to just positive will become negative, negative will become positive, and there's not actually going to be a flipping of the actual, the crust isn't going to move, which would be, I guess, disruptive, but not as catastrophic as the flip, and that's what Ben's coming on to talk about. So I'll save this a little bit, but I'll tell you what. I bet you any money if you donate to Hillary Clinton's initiatives, she and her friends, they will find a way to stop the polls from reversing. In reality, what she's doing is they're taking all the hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars that they've stolen over the years by saying that it's going to a war zone or that it's going to turn down the thermostat on the planet, and they're just building themselves deep underground apartments. That's what it is, because when the polls actually do physically flip, that gets me sick. You and I are going to be in paddle boats up here, and Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi are going to be eating gourmet ice cream somewhere a mile below the earth. Doesn't that make you upset? It should. Here's one last thing before we go to break. It has a lot to do with what I'm going to talk about tonight with the great Megan Fox. Crisis in New York, headline from Fox News. We learned about this guy not too long ago, but there's an update with him now. 94-year-old veteran struggles to move on after a nursing home evicts him and replaces him with migrants. The veteran and his daughter say the city is more worried about migrants than Americans. Well, yes. Well, this is a microcosm. For as big as New York City is, this is a microcosm, because the macrocosm is the macro is definitely the rest of the country. They don't care about anybody. So that's what we have here. Frank Tomorrow, 94 years old, loved the senior center he'd call home for 5 years until he was told he needed to live somewhere else. I felt horrible, Tomorrow told Fox News. It's no joke getting thrown out of a house. Months later, after 2 moves and an injury that put him in the hospital, the senior was living with his daughter when he learned migrants were moving into his old residence free of charge. A lifelong New Yorker, Tomorrow said he grew up in the slums of the Lower East Side during the 30s and 40s. I do get upset when I see them handing out all this money and all these things, and I'm paying taxes and getting kicked out. I never got anything from the city or the state. And there's a little something for you, because we'll be talking about medical kidnapping tonight. We're going to be talking about just the way that we are managed. We are managed by the state. That's really what it is, especially when the state is involved in the management of so many people's lives from cradle to grave. Then we really are we're just accounting figures at that point. And then when you have much bigger internationalist ideas of what they want to do with the country get into the mix, what the importation of millions upon millions of unaccounted for migrants really mean to the future vision for the country and the world, oh man, then the cuts are really going to get made. And a 94-year-old, There's not a lot of leverage someone like that has with these slave drivers. We will be right back. Megan Fox is going to be on the air, and it'll be a great, great night, starting with a great first hour. So don't go anywhere. BRB.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's ride!
Oh, yes. I've got the late night jazz out, though it's not too late, and hopefully everybody at home is brewing up some, quite frankly, coffee, because it's going to be a wild one tonight. Talking about the state, of course. Talking about medicine and much, much more. The welfare of children. And our guest, Megan Fox, she's been covering CPS and family court corruption and medical kidnappings for what she says is nearly 20 years now. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of skin in the game right there, and she's been doing that not only with PJ Media, which we cover a lot of stuff from PJ Media over the years, but other outlets, and she is on with us tonight. Megan, how are you?
I am good. How are you, Frank?
Oh, I'm just tickled pink. I'm so glad that we got together tonight, and I'm so glad we already have so much in the bank.
I know, me too. You have to let me fangirl just for a minute because I love this show. You had the best COVID coverage in 2020 that I heard anywhere. You kept me sane, man, all through 2020. I was like, what's Frank going to say tonight?
You know,
so good.
I think the key to our COVID coverage was, when there was big news, we got to the news. We needed to theorize and speculate. We had to theorize and speculate because, how much truth do we ever really get? But as most things, it's what games are we going to play right now to keep ourselves sane? Can we do something to take our mind off of this stuff? The numbers getting updated, this and that, and then of course the election. But I'm so glad that even though it took us a little while, we're sitting here tonight, and thank you for being here.
Me too. I'm so happy that I finally saw your message. I hate that Twitter buries stuff in a black hole from people that don't follow each other, and then you can't see the messages, and it got lost, but now it's all behind us now. So this is great,
right.
And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, absolutely. And you are an author of 2 books I'd love to talk about at some point because I think it's all very, very relevant. But what is also very relevant, especially for New Yorkers, is the concept of medical kidnapping. And in particular, you had this has really become almost like a true crime genre into it, like a subgenre in itself, and you will do a very, very good job covering this stuff. And I would love for you to start us off with a very big, important case, and that is the case of Maya Kowalski. Tell us about the significance of this case, and I'm just going to let you roll. Don't cut any corners. Color it all in for us, please.
Well, the Maya Kowalski case is really one of the most heinous cases of medical kidnappings that I've ever seen. And like you said, I've been covering this stuff for about 20 years. And it started out where there was a documentary made, and that's how the American public became aware of it on Netflix. It was called Take Care of Maya. And I actually didn't see it. I didn't see the documentary, but I heard that the trial was coming to television. It was going to be broadcast. And somebody gave me like a quick rundown. I think it was one of my followers who reached out to me on Twitter who was like, you got to look at this. This is right up your alley. It's the perfect case for you to cover. And I do cover live court coverage sometimes. Like I covered the Johnny Depp case and I covered Gwyneth Paltrow, like things that people are interested in. But I never covered a case about medical kidnapping. And I kind of stopped talking about CPS corruption for a while because the audience just wasn't into it. People don't want to hear about CPS corruption and how bad it is. They don't want to hear about parents losing their children. They would rather believe that parents abuse their children than they would believe that the state can kidnap your child. I think it's too scary for people.
Yeah, oh, it definitely is. Definitely is scary to consider.
Right. And so nobody really wanted to hear me talk about that. I used to have a weekly court corruption update or like weekly show, and I quit doing it because I thought it's not resonating with the audience. The only audience that wants to tune in are people who've been through this, and that's just not a way to reach out to the masses, right? So then this case comes up, and this little girl, her story is that at 9 years old, she was a perfectly healthy child. She gets a sprained ankle during gymnastics and she can't recover. And the pain just keeps getting worse and worse and worse at 9 till she's actually in a wheelchair, cannot put any weight on her feet, very little weight on her feet. And her feet start turning inwards called dystonia. Her muscles get really stiff. And her mother and father took her to, and her mother's name is Beata Kowalski. Her father's name is Jack. Jack was a fire chief for many years in Chicago, and then they moved to Florida, and her mother, Beata, was a nurse, an infusion nurse. They take her to tons of doctors. At first, they think that she has steroid myopathy because she was on steroids for a long time for asthma. So they think it's steroid myopathy. They're not really sure. They're trying all these different things. They can't get her out of a wheelchair, but they put her in physical therapy. They do an inpatient at Tampa General. So they check her into Tampa General and do an inpatient therapy where she's doing cognitive and physical therapy every single day for hours a day. And none of it helps. She can't get out of a wheelchair. So they've done everything. They go to all these different children's hospitals. They go to Rush in Chicago. I think they went to Rush. They went to Lurie's Children's Hospital in Chicago, the Tampa General, All Children's, Johns Hopkins, All Children's. She had been there, and they had put in an infusion port for her because she went to this new doctor who said, let's try ketamine infusions. So they start doing the ketamine infusions, and the small doses are not really helping her. So her doctor says, we can do larger doses. So they just keep upping it and upping it. Well, they get to the point where the dosage is too high for them to do without it being a medically overseen coma. And there's a doctor in Mexico who does it, but they don't do it here in the United States, because the right people haven't paid off the FDA or whatever it is you have to do to get that, and to get it approved in the United States. So they go to Mexico. It's like a last option. This poor child has had no relief from the pain at all, ever. So they take her to Mexico, and they meet this doctor who puts her into a ketamine coma for 5 days. So she's totally out, right? It's like a medical coma, totally out for 5 days. When she awakes from the coma and they wake her up and she recovers from it, which takes a couple days to recover from being, intubated and all that, she has the first pain relief that she's had for like almost a year. And they took pictures. She was able to move her arms all the way above her head, which she had not been able to do. She was able to be touched with it. Now, she has CRPS. They diagnosed her with complex regional pain syndrome, which is very rare, and it's very misunderstood, and it always looks like child abuse to doctors that don't know about it. And this disease is called the suicide disease. Like, the pain is so bad, they say it's worse than childbirth, and it's when you're touched, even your skin is called allodynia, becomes extremely sensitive.
Good Lord.
And so just a light touch, like even a sheet on your skin, feels like stabbing knives.
Jeez, all the things that could go wrong, man. It's just, count your blessings. That and it's so this in itself, this is something that This was triggered by the ankle injury, like nothing before then.
Yeah, CRPS is often triggered by an injury that then doesn't. It just the pain instead of so your brain signals get mixed up somehow, and instead of the pain lessening, your brain interprets the pain as getting more and more and more. It's like the opposite, and then it can take over. And in Maya's case, she was one of the very rare cases where she had whole body CRPS. It was everywhere, mostly in her feet and legs was the worst. It also comes with skin lesions. I see someone in the chat saying sounds like shingles. Yeah, imagine that kind. You know how shingles has blisters as well? Well, this has like skin lesions too, although it's not a virus. Although who knows? I mean, who knows? They don't know enough about it. All they know is that it is not curable, that it's like an autoimmune disorder that comes and goes. So you can have good days and you can have really bad days. And the skin lesions are a sign of it flaring up. And so what happened to Maya is she goes to Mexico, she goes through this ketamine coma, she's getting better. She comes back to Florida, she's doing her physical therapy, and now she's able to do it because she has pain relief. And they're still doing ketamine infusions, but it's a lot less, and they're doing it every, they're not doing a coma anymore. She's just getting these infusions regularly to keep the pain at bay. The doctor described it as ketamine resetting the brain, like it's supposed to reset the pain signals, which is why the coma was important, because it reboots your brain.
I've heard this. I've heard this from friends of mine, Megan. People who are not in any real physical bad shape, but they are really cued in on a lot of these studies that are being done to help treat depression and everything else with ketamine. Whereas, back in the day, you hear about, Special K, people doing bumps of ketamine, and it's animal tranquilizer and all that stuff. And now people are saying that there's a lot of legitimate inquiry into what it can do on a number of levels. Obviously, you're talking about something that is very, very physical and severe. And then I have had friends that reported back on emotional and other types of applications too.
Yeah, so ketamine is interesting because the kind of ketamine we're talking about in Maya's case was completely physician supervised. She only ever got ketamine through a prescription and under physician supervision. Contrary to what the defense tried to allege, her mother never gave her ketamine infusions at home. Now, Beata was an infusion nurse, but she was giving her infusions of other medicines that she was given permission to give her infusions for. I don't remember exactly what those were, but they weren't ketamine. The ketamine she was giving her at home was oral ketamine. So the defense tried to make a big deal about her giving, these infusions through the port, but that wasn't happening. That was all supervised by a doctor. And it's different than street ketamine too. It's not the same thing. Like there has been, what we found out during the trial is that there has been no deaths when it comes to physician supervised ketamine treatments, none at all. So that was interesting to me. So the reason why so how she gets medically kidnapped is sad. So she's doing really well. She's doing her physical therapy. She's getting stronger. She's actually like putting weight on her feet, able to get out of her wheelchair. And she's not walking yet, but she's doing strengthening exercises that is bringing back her muscles. And she's able to do things she couldn't do before. She also got back into extracurricular stuff at school and like going, it was a really good improvement for her, and she was doing much better. Well, she had a flare up. She had what they call a relapse, and she was having intense stomach pain. Her mother tried, they called her doctor. They talked to the doctor who was giving her the ketamine treatments, and he said he had given her what he could give her. He couldn't do anything else, so they needed to take her to the emergency room. And they take her to the emergency room at Johns Hopkins All Children's, JHatch. And while they're there, Beata, of course, she's panicked. Her daughter is very ill. She's screaming and crying in pain. You can't touch her because she's in more pain if you touch her. And the nurses kept wanting to put a blood pressure cuff on her. or to do these, invasive things where if they touched her, and they weren't understanding what Beata was saying. Beata was trying to say, my daughter has CRPS. She can't be touched. You're not allowed to touch her. Here's what you need to do. You need to give her this amount of ketamine. Beata wasn't aware that they couldn't give that amount of ketamine. It's not approved in use for children anyway here. And so they thought she was just crazy. They'd never heard of this before. And so basically a misunderstanding and them not liking how Beata talked to them. And you have to understand she was Polish. First language is not English. And if you've ever known a Polish woman before, you know that they are fire.
Yes.
Right? Polish women are fire, and they will tell you what they think, and they will be short about it. It's just the way they are. And of course, you add stress to that, and Beata was being sharp with them and telling them what not to do, and they did not like that. So the next thing you know, somebody in the hospital is calling the child abuse doctor, Dr. Sally Smith. And Sally Smith is called in to evaluate this case. Now, one of the major issues that Sally Smith created and allowed the Kowalskis to sue them was that when she came into the room, she did not introduce herself as a member of the DCF Child Protective Services team. She introduced herself as a doctor with the Child Protection team. Well, she's wearing a J-Hatch badge, and the parents thought she was just another doctor at J-Hatch. She starts asking questions, and she's not there as a doctor. She's there as an investigator.
Yeah.
And Frank, do you have rights when investigators start questioning you?
Yep. Yes, you do. You can get a lawyer.
Should.
Number one. I mean, this was so. Now I know that this is just wrapped up here. We see the situation, the kind of physical condition that Maya was in. You've done a really good job at setting the stage at the hospital, how we get to this point, and how now there's an issue with the system has now taken interest in the family and Maya's case. So from there, how do we get to this ruling? Because there's even more tragedy along the way. Maya's mother doesn't make it out of this, no? That's another thing I remember about this.
No, things get really bad from here on out. So Dr. Sally Smith does call the treating physician during her investigation. She calls Dr. Kirkpatrick, who was the one who diagnosed Maya with CRPS. He tells her in no uncertain terms, this is not abuse. It is not Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is what she wants to say Beata has, which is she's making her child sick for attention.
Which is incredible, because when you go outside of this situation and you examine contemporary American culture at large, Munchausen by proxy is what is driving most social media and most child quote-unquote interventions, especially when it comes to transitions and all that other stuff. It's just incredible how this comes out to play here.
Yeah, and Munchausen syndrome by proxy is really a joke anyway. It's very Hollywoodized. It is not real. They've taken it out of the DSM. Now they call it factitious disorder or medical child abuse, because they know damn well the second they say Munchausen, everybody goes, bullshit, prove it. There's no test for Munchausen. There are people who abuse children medically, but the idea that Munchausen is a psychological syndrome, if that were the case, then why don't you put them in a psych ward? No, you don't. You put them in jail. If you really believed this was a mental disorder, then you would offer these people help. You wouldn't just put them in jail and charge them with child abuse, would you? I just think it's child abuse, and I think that Munchausen is a convenient way for CPS to use a pseudo-scientific sounding thing as a weapon against parents they don't like. And these nurses and these doctors hated Beata Kowalski, and they let her know that. They treated her daughter roughly. What happened after Sally Smith came in is Beata starts realizing, nobody here is helping my daughter. They're not controlling her pain. They refuse to give her any pain medication that is helping. They were giving her tramadol. They even put her on Haldol, Frank. Haldol, and a 10-year-old. You can't give, that's a neurotoxin. It's not approved in use for juveniles. And they gave her Haldol at J-Hatch. which they said it was to calm her down because she was swearing and all this stuff. They made her sound like the kid in The Exorcist. It was nuts. So anyway, Beata says she wants to take her daughter out of there. She and Jack, they want to take her out. They want to, against medical advice, take her to a different, her doctor, Dr. Hanna said he would see her, so, and get her into like an inpatient program somewhere else where they knew about CRPS. That's what her mother wanted to do, was get her into a facility that had CRPS experts. They were told, with no court order, and here's where the lawsuit comes in. They were told they were not allowed to leave the hospital or they would be arrested. But there was no court order in place. So the hospital lied and told them they couldn't take her out. So at that point, now they know, we're in trouble. So they start trying to cooperate with everything the hospital wants to do. So they say, okay, they back off they say, we don't want to take her out. We're not going to take her out. We'll listen to anything you have to say. That's fine. Then they say, we'll come to a family meeting and we'll talk about it. They get to the family meeting, and the family meeting consists of 2 police officers and like 10 people at the hospital. And they're telling them, we're taking custody of your daughter and we're getting a court order. There was no, how can we work to get her better? Let's come up with a plan. None of that. It was, you're out, we're in, you are no longer allowed to see your daughter. So they go to the court hearing. And of course, the judge, I have been exposing this on my channel on YouTube and on Rumble. I have the dependency court hearing transcripts. We've been reading through them as dramatic readings, me and some of my lawyer friends and other friends on YouTube. And it is sick, Frank, what happened to them in this dependency hearing. The very first shelter hearing, the judge knew what she was going to do. She knew she was taking her. And instead of just coming clean, she calls a sidebar, which is totally inappropriate because there's no one else in the room besides the parties to the case and the lawyers. So she doesn't need a sidebar. She can say it in front of the parents, but she doesn't want to because she's going to tell the lawyers, I'm taking custody of her. So here's how we're going to work this out. Here's how all of this is going to go. And hearsay is allowed in family court, in juvenile court. That's how all of this happened. Sally Smith's report left out many exculpatory things. She never wrote in the report that Dr. Kirkpatrick told her that this is not child abuse. She never wrote in her report that the family had been getting Maya psychological care for years. She totally left it out. And then she lied and said that she had a psychological disorder and that she wasn't getting any psychological care, that there was rumors that her mother had a mental disorder. None of that was true. And she accused Beata of having Munchausen. And this is a pediatrician. She's not qualified to diagnose Beata Kowalski, an adult, with Munchausen, which is supposedly a psychological disorder. So it was all based on a lie. To begin with. And that day when the judge ordered that Beata have no contact with her daughter, Beata fainted and hit her head on the table on the way down in the courtroom. They had to take her out on a stretcher. She was then diagnosed with a syndrome associated with intense grief that had been caused by the court. Mm-hmm. Any mental disorder that Beata had was caused by this system. You have to understand, too, that Beata was the child of Polish immigrants that survived communism. Her father was dragged away in the middle of the night by communists when she was like 8 years old. And he spent time in a prison and was eventually returned to the family, but she was traumatized, at the tender age of 8 by the boot of the state.
And then here
it is happening to her in America, the place they ran,
Yeah.
How sick is that?
It's horrible to hear, and of course she ends up taking her life. That's what I heard. That's what I read.
Yeah. Eventually, as they're winding their way through this process, and she realizes they are not going to give her custody of this child, and she's the reason why Maya can't be with her father, because her father's not accused of anything, but they were still putting him on supervised visitation and limiting his time and telling him to divorce her. And so she came to the conclusion that the only thing she could do is take herself out of the equation, and then maybe the court would give her daughter back to her family. And sure enough, Frank, 7 days after Beata committed suicide, they give her back. and drop the case.
The rage that I'm holding back right now is now going from there, because let's just jump ahead to the trial's conclusion. The family won something. I mean, the money is incredible, and I just hope that they bankrupt everybody associated with that hospital. But the money is secondary to the kind of everything. Anytime you see something like this, you think about precedent going forward. Tell us about the result of the trial and what you and other people are hoping this means for the future.
Well, the jury awarded them $261 million, 211 of which were compensatory, 50 million of which was punitive. And punitive damages are awarded in order to incentivize the organization to never do something like this again. They were found liable for false imprisonment in the 7 days they did not have a court order. They were not allowed to go beyond the 7 days in the scope of the trial because they got Chapter 39 immunity, which is a whole other thing that we should never have, which is immunity for state actors who violate your constitutional rights. That should not be a thing. It is so upsetting to me that it is a thing. But just for the 7 days, they got false imprisonment, battery, because one of the social workers actually stripped her and took photographs of her under false pretenses while she screamed, and they had to hold her down.
Wow.
I mean, false imprisonment, battery, what were the other things? Oh, they found them liable for driving Beata to suicide, so wrongful death. They found them liable for medical malpractice because, see, they were billing for CRPS, but they didn't believe she had it. They kept saying that's why they took her away from her parents. They said she didn't have CRPS. They said she had a psychological disorder called conversion disorder, but they billed the insurance company for CRPS. So they got them on billing fraud too. They also got the medical malpractice comes in because they actually, in the JHatch records, from the time she had visited before, they had her diagnosis as CRPS. Then she gets there for the stomach thing, and suddenly they're erasing CRPS, and now it's a conversion disorder, but they didn't offer her or give her any of the therapy that you normally give someone with conversion disorder. They were supposed to give her physical therapy and cognitive therapy every day and psychological therapy. She got, for 3 months she was in the hospital, she got 3 hours of psychological therapy, and she got a few more hours of physical therapy and cognitive, but certainly not daily. And they had people up on the stand testifying that, well, I went there to give her therapy, but she wasn't in the room. You didn't make an appointment? You just turned around and left then? You've got a kid that you say has this thing, but you're not treating her for it, and you're billing the insurance for the other thing that her parents said she had.
It's so, Megan, I've spent a little bit more time than I wanted to in hospitals the last couple of years, and I'll tell you, just from what I have seen and what I've had to do to stand in for people and advocate, it's probably untold how bad it is. Now, what you're talking about is what should be considered, because of the size of the payout, the log of all the abuses. This is a pretty landmark situation here, a case that I think will be studied for a long time. But when you think about how the little infractions, the little things that are going on, the fraud, and then of course the bigger situation here that you have outlined from the beginning is when doctors and nurses, when medical staff feel in some way that their authority has been checked, or if they have been in some way insulted by someone who thinks that they have the ability to tell them what to do, even if it's clear that you are dealing with an emotional parent who is freaking out, they're going to say things that in their right mind they're never going to say ever before. There's something about the pompous and playing God mentality that is really, it's only gotten worse over the years. And it's
well, especially since COVID. I mean, they gave those doctors the right to behave like like kings over us.
Yes.
And they haven't given that up yet, Frank. They're not going to give that up. Clearly, we have to take it from them, and this is one of the ways that we can take it from them, is these lawsuits have to go forward. You said landmark. A medical malpractice case like this has never been this successful. This is the most successful medical malpractice suit ever in this country. And it's what opened the door and opened the eyes of my audience. And now they can't get enough, and they want to know more about medical kidnapping. They can't believe that it's happening like this. And I've got story after story after story. The problem now is the defense is fighting tooth and nail. J. Hatch isn't going to pay them, Frank. They're refusing to pay.
What?
They would rather pay the 12% interest every day. That's $250,000 a day that accrues while they don't pay, and spend money to have their attorneys file frivolous motions, which is what they've been doing since the verdict, attacking the jury, attacking the foreman's wife, asking for a new trial, asking the judge to overturn the jury's verdict. They're going to appeal for years.
Megan, I heard that you were actually a part of the trial. That Johns I heard that Johns Hopkins wanted a mistrial declared because a wife of one of the jurors follows you on Twitter.
Yeah. That's one of their reasons, Frank. The jury number one's wife follows me on Twitter. They put a screenshot of my Twitter page in their motion. It's insane.
Wow.
It's insane. And they also blamed LawTube. So the lawyers on LawTube who this juror's wife also followed were like Law and Lumber and I want to say, who was the other one? A Recovery Addict. He's not a lawyer, but he was covering the case. That's a great channel, by the way. Also, like Uncivil Law and like all these other lawyers who were following the case, they blamed our coverage as being, I don't even know what, because we're allowed to cover a trial and she's allowed to watch our coverage. What she's not allowed to do is talk to her husband about it. He's not allowed to talk to her about it. But it makes sense that she went online to talk about it because she couldn't talk to her husband. Mm-hmm. And by the way, her husband's a former law enforcement officer. You think they're not used to her not being able to talk to him about cases he works on? Of course.
Absolutely.
It's a garbage motion. It's going to be heard on December 15th. So that's coming up next. I'll be covering that. If there's cameras in the courtroom, for sure. I'll be covering that hearing. It is an outrageous offense against also the jury system, Frank.
Yeah.
They are asking the judge to grant them total access to the juror's email, phone, and his wife's phone so they can investigate him and they can, dig through his life and look for anything to impugn him with. If this is allowed, who in their right mind would ever willingly serve on a jury after this?
I know.
I wouldn't. I would tell the court, I'm scared to serve on a jury because the J. Hatch defense, what they did to juror number one, I'm not signing up for that. I'm scared to be on this jury. Forget it. I don't need my wife or husband stalked online, have all their social media posts put into motions. They doxed them for a solid week before they realized that the public was outraged by it, and then they re-uploaded their motion with redactions. Oh, well, it's too late. You gave their address to the entire world.
Tooth and nail they fight. And yeah, it's one of those things where these, you said it, especially since COVID, there has been increased anxiety. Anytime you feel a flutter in your chest, you're like, please don't let this be the heart attack. Please, don't let this be the reason why I have to go back to the hospital for the first time in God knows how many years, because I know that there are good people in there, and when you meet a good nurse and when someone you love is being cared by somebody who actually has dignity, you feel like you've been blessed by God himself, because other than that, there is just so much that has ruined the confidence that we all may have had at one point, that if we are in a jam, or if something bad happened, we can walk into an American hospital and the best teams in the world were going to be there waiting for you. And it's not true. It's just not true, and it's scary. Frank, the chat is reminding me that I have to tell you about Dumpster Jesus. Okay.
This is one of the most egregious things that J. Hatch did. So after they took custody of Maya and they isolated her from her family, she had a few things from home. Her mother had her priest come and visit her and bring her a consecrated host for communion. She had holy water. They're Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
She had holy water. She had a rosary. She had a prayer book. She had some religious items. Johns Hopkins and DCF conspired together to take her consecrated host, which they claimed could be infused with ketamine, and they threw it in the trash.
Wow.
They threw Christ in the dumpster. You talk about having a God complex. They actually took the body of Christ and they threw it in a dumpster. And I always explain to people, because if you're not Catholic, you don't understand necessarily, but the consecrated host, which is the wafer that the priest blesses, before he blesses it, it's just a piece of bread. But after he blesses it, the Catholics believe that it is the body of Christ. It's transubstantiation. So there are many, many rules. You cannot drop it on the floor. You cannot use it for any other purpose. You have to dispose of it in a certain way. Even the crumbs get, brushed into the wine and the priest consumes it, because you can't throw Christ on the floor. And these people, instead of returning it to their chaplain, they had a Catholic chaplain at the hospital.
Ketamine.
They could have brought it to the chaplain. They threw it in a dumpster. They desecrated the host, and there was a Catholic on the jury. We found that out during the jury questioning, because they wanted to know about all the Catholic stuff. And it was like, oh shit, you've got a Catholic on your jury. You're screwed now, because that's one of the most egregious things I've ever heard. And not to mention that Beata was a very serious Catholic. No serious Catholic would ever desecrate the host by putting ketamine on it or any other thing.
Right. And that's really what it comes down to. It is, and I said it the other night, I forgot what the hell it was about. When you're dealing with a certain group or a group mentality or a type of person, it really, this particular story, this part of the story is really just about, oh, is this something that they enjoy? Let's destroy it. Because that is, it is the most ridiculous thing in the world to think that a parent would lace the host, they would lace the Eucharist with ketamine to be able to what?
And they never even tested it, Frank. So they were asked on the stand, DCF was asked on the stand, did you test it? Did you test these items? They also took chocolate cake away from her and the holy water, saying that the cake must be infused with ketamine too, that Beata was somehow sneaking it into the hospital. So they took her cake and Jesus and threw him in the dumpster. And no one ever tested it to find out if their little theory here was true.
Yeah, no.
What they were really doing was trying to break the bond between her and her parents, between her and her religion, between anything she loved, so that they could adopt her out eventually, because they get money for doing it. This is a disgusting abuse of power. And the fact that Jay Hatch is fighting this after all the evidence that came out, and I mean, there's some of this evidence they don't even deny. They don't even deny it. I mean, and they still think they don't have to pay. And there's another lawsuit coming, Frank. The Kushner family, same doctor, same hospital, same shit. False allegations of abuse. False allegations of child abuse, sexual abuse, and everything. Ruined a family, complete, and it was all hogwash and garbage.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah, go ahead.
CPS in general. When you're talking about these gigantic cases, and these are gigantic cases, and of course you can find hot spots. Okay, well now we're starting to see a pattern. This hospital is obviously using the power of the state to really break the will of people and to just, I mean, it's gangsterism. But when you examine the country and you talk to people who have been involved in this, how much good does CPS do? Because, there's somebody out there that's definitely gotten saved from a household that was horrendous. And I'm sure that there are plenty of people who are grateful that CPS was there to pull them out of a situation when they didn't have any power of their own. They were too young. But Outside of that, it's almost like with, hey, are there any success stories with Obamacare? Oh, sure. If you rob Peter to pay Paul, I'm sure that Paul is going to say that it's great. But when you go the 30,000-foot view and you start seeing what this does and the political injection of politics into this, how you are now enforcing the mandate of the state, especially when it comes to homeschooling, when it comes to avoiding recommended vaccine schedules. I know that CPS has become a cudgel to deter good parents from things like that. When you cover that, like, how would you say the general state of affairs is with Child Protective Services across the board?
I can just tell you what Health and Human Services' own statistics say. I think Health and Human Services oversees all of Child Protective Services across the country. And their own statistics as late as 2019 said that 84% of all investigative cases are unfounded. Unfounded, which means that less than 20%, and it's much less actually because there are some other categories in there that I can't remember right off the top of my head, but less than 20% are actually abuse. If you, in your office job or whatever, only got it right 20 or less than 20% of the time, you'd be fired. It's only government agencies that can have a less than 20% success rate, and they get to continue on. And they don't get gutted, and they don't get audited, and they don't get, nobody goes to jail. In Missouri, I did a 29-part series in Missouri. Their DCF office lost 1,000 kids. They lost 1,000 children, some of whom were rescued by U.S. Marshals in sex trafficking. And no one was fired. The boss got demoted to the second chair, and they replaced her with somebody else, but she's still there.
These are children. These are children
who lost 1,000 kids.
These are children that were in custody.
They were taken from their parents
and then lost.
Put into the system and then lost. Just in Missouri alone, 1,000 children, Frank. And some of them have never been recovered. And the person in charge didn't report it to anyone. So, I'm at the point where I believe that foster care and our Child Protective Services does more harm than good. I actually think that children would be better off if we didn't even have such a thing. If maybe we had more reliance on our community and our churches and, those of us who live in a neighborhood who can get together and try and help people in these situations. Because, my God, most of the things that CPS investigates people for are really poverty issues. They're not abuse. They're what they call neglect. And that could be anything from dirty dishes in the sink to having a roach problem to a hoarding problem to, not having enough food. You should never take a child from parents because they don't have enough food. We have enough services in this country to get some people some food. We have enough money. There's no reason to take a child from a parent that has an empty cupboard. That's outrageous, but that's what they do. They do this. You talked about homeschooling. Michaela Haynes in Missouri, a little girl who ended up killing herself because DCF it was her guardian ad litem, who was a court-appointed guardian ad litem, continued to recommend to the court that she be housed with her father, who was a convicted child rapist. He went to jail for 7 years for raping her stepsister, and her guardian ad litem continued to tell the court that she was better off with him than her homeschooling mother. And she told the court that they were educationally neglected with their mother, who homeschooled them.
Wow.
When they put them in public school, her and her sisters, they were all outperforming every kid in their class. So they were both of them on the honor roll. It was always a farce. It was always a lie. And that they would rather put her with her rapist father than with her mother, who was a homeschooler. And she ended up killing herself. She hung herself on their family property because she learned that her guardian ad litem was going to testify on her father's behalf. And it is a sick case. And I have never been able to get anybody in Missouri, not a Republican or a Democrat. And I've talked to all of them. I've gone to the representative's office in person. I took families with me. And nobody there in the Missouri government will sign on to Michaela's law, which is about removing immunity from these court-appointed actors who did this to her and are doing it to children all over Missouri. Nobody, Frank, will do anything about this. I have senators I've talked to. You know what one of them said to me? Oh, this was so frustrating. So I'm telling him all of this stuff about this judge that I found in Missouri who was communicating illegally, ex parte, with one of the guardians ad litem and promising her that he was going to help her in the lawsuit that was brought against her by one of these families, which is totally outrageous. It was in his court. He can't do that. I exposed the email. He resigns, and I go to the courthouse, or to the, not the courthouse, I go to the legislature, and I sit down with these senators and I tell them all about what's going on, and I hand them the stack of papers showing that this judge is up to his ears in bad stuff. He's refinancing his $600,000 home every 6 months. There's something wrong here. Like this guy is not right. He's communicating ex parte. You know what they told me? One guy looks at me and he goes, well, I think we can impeach a judge. We've never done it. I wanted to come across that table and choke him. I mean, that's your power as a representative of the people. You, as a congressperson, as a House of Representatives, you can impeach a judge and should impeach a judge just to even to send a message that, hey, you better watch out. If you're treating our citizens like this, we're going to get rid of you. But they wouldn't do a damn thing. They wouldn't lift a finger to help these families, and they still haven't to this day. And that was in 2021, I want to say.
And this sounds a lot like the horrific. I know a little bit about reunification camps, but I know that you know a lot more. And I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about that on the other side of the break. I'm going to hold. Would you stay on with me for another segment?
Of course I will.
Okay. This is great. I feel like this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I really do.
Me too.
And so when we come back, I want you to talk about not only these reunification camps, but I also want to talk about what we see going on in other countries, like the UK. I believe like every year there is a high-profile case of parents having their sick infants essentially sentenced to death by the state, even rejecting their attempts to seek free care in other countries. There's that, and then I also want to talk about our home state over here of New York and that Section 2.13 thing. Yeah, so we were talking about.
We have to get to that. We're gonna laugh.
Medical kidnapping, all right. Yeah. All right, we're gonna be right back with Megan Fox. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to invite you all over to, there's two links in the description of the episode, and also I tweeted them all out, and Truth and Gabbed and GETTR and all that stuff. There's the Foxhole link that'll bring you right to the show page that we're already live, everything's going well, and then there's also another link that you can click, which is just as easy if everything else just shits the bed for you for some reason. That is quitefrankly.tv. It's all powered by Foxhole. Get on over there. And it's just 2 clicks away to watch the second half of the show. Afterwards, as always, tonight when I get home, the full episode will be uploaded and archived on Rumble, on BitChute, on Rockfin. We're going to be starting tonight, we have a brand new operation that we're kicking into place with clipping and highlighting. So there's going to be wonderful guest highlights that are going to be flooding the internet soon. And we're also going to take the full uninterrupted interview with Megan Fox and upload that as its own video. So all these things are going to start being done afterwards. You're going to get inundated with smaller bite-sized clips of Quite Frankly, and we're rolling the dice big for 2024. When we come back, hopefully you'll be there. Goodbye.
It's intermission time, folks. Time out to press the like button. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to intermission.
We'll be right back.
Revolution.